So the first presenter we have today is Patty Moore. So how many of you have ever eaten at a Sonic restaurant? See a show of hands. Happy hour, 2 to 4. Wonderful. So Patty Moore was with Sonic for many, many years. I met her through Leadership Oklahoma, and I remember the thing that stuck with me about Patty in those early days was how well she was connected with all of their franchisees. And because I had Ditch Witch background and we had lots and lots of dealers around the world, I could really relate to that. And I could spot some leadership qualities in Patty that I really, really admired. And she has done a wonderful thing for many organizations. So she was president of Sonic. She's since retired from that. She's now chairman of Red Robin. She is on the board of One Oak, and she is on the board of Quick Trip. She's also on many other nonprofit boards. At one point, she was the national chair of the American Arthritis Association. So she is a mover and a shaker. She's an author and a speaker. So she's got a lot of leadership experience to share this morning and to talk about her transformational leadership moment. So with that, give Patty a round of applause.
All right. So before I introduce our second one, how many of you, when he said chairman of Red Robin, went, Red Robin? Like your head? I know I did. So it's working, Patty. Whatever you're doing, it's working. Okay, our second panelist, Dick Greenlee. Dick is a leader, and I've got a chance to know Dick over the past few years. We've got a connection because he started out his career as a geologist, playing with rocks. And of course, my career, I started out as an engineer, so we both kind of came from technical backgrounds. Dick is the very successful CEO of a company called Pumps of Oklahoma, but also in 2008 founded an organization called Water For. So if you just look at your table, how many of you have had a drink of clean water this morning? Raise your hands. I will tell you, there are lots of places in the world that doesn't happen, okay? And Dick set out a few years ago with the organization Water For to try and solve that problem for the rest of the world. Dick has spoken in front of the United Nations a couple of times, has linked up with the largest nonprofit in the world, who has looked at what Water For is doing, based here out of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and says, you know what, you guys have, we think, the key and the model to solve the world's water problem. And I can't wait for you to get to hear from Dick. He's got an amazing story. Talk about a guy that's got the why figured out. I know you'll connect with that when you hear Dick speak. So let's give a round of applause to Dick Greenlee.
So if I say Oklahoma and the word cheese fries, does everybody know what I'm talking about? Absolutely. 1975, I was working for Boersma Beverage in Stillwater, Oklahoma, which was the Coors distributor. I was the night manager, which basically meant my wife and I cleaned toilets, checked the air and the tires on the trucks, and when a bar ran out of beer, I made the run, all right? And so every once in a while, Stan ran things a little better than most. I didn't get to go to his place as much as I did some of the other little more fly-by-night places, but I would go deliver beer to Stan. He acts like he remembers that. He doesn't remember that at all, me showing up at his place, but he's been very gracious to befriend me for all those years. But everybody knows Stan, part of obviously Eskimo Joe's, Mexico Joe's, Giuseppe's, all out of Stillwater. Everybody knows about the t-shirts. You can find them worldwide. It's a great way to spot somebody from Oklahoma. You can be in Europe and go, there's somebody that knows about Oklahoma right there. What a lot of people don't know is the whole promotional side of that business. So if you've got a business, and we use them quite a bit, whether it's t-shirts, hats, any kind of uniform, all kinds of things, they do a lot of corporate work for different organizations. So there's my plug to Stan, because they make really good, high-quality promotional items. So anyway, that's our friend Stan.
All right, so with that, we're going to hear from our first panelist, Patty Moore, and she's going to share her personal transformational leadership story.
Okay. Thank you, Brent and David. Good to be here with you all this morning. My story was at Sonic, It was back in 1993, so let me set the stage for you. I had joined Sonic as Vice President of Marketing, had been there about 9 months. I was the first female officer for the company, and I was the youngest officer for the company. And at that point, I'd been at the company 9 months, I was about 6 months pregnant. So let me set that stage for you. Sonic was in the midst of a major transition. The senior management team, and I wasn't a part of it yet, but the senior management team had decided that if Sonic was going to grow as a brand, we were going to have to make some tough decisions. We were going to have to start enforcing a lot more operational standards. We were going to have to come together as a brand. We were 85% franchised, and we didn't have a lot of brand standards. Here in Oklahoma City, you could go to different Sonics and sometimes get tater tots at one, maybe not get tater tots at another. The menus were vastly different. And we recognized that if we were going to grow, we all had to be selling the same cola, we all had to be on the same menu. Well, as you can imagine, franchisees were not very happy about this. We were asking them to make changes to their own menu. And things were headed for a showdown. There was a big meeting on a particular Saturday. The franchisees had formed an association, and the Franchise Association had decided to meet in Oklahoma City with the management team and really have a knockdown, drag-out fight about what changes we were going to enforce. Senior management was calling it tough love at the time, and that's not what the franchisees were calling it. So there was a big meeting Friday afternoon with the senior management team and planning for this Saturday morning meeting. They were expecting about 400 franchisees. They called me into the meeting Friday afternoon. I wasn't part of the meeting. I was invited to the meeting, but I didn't have a speaking role. So they called me into the room and said, "We've been talking about the best strategy for tomorrow morning's meeting, and we've decided that the best thing is for you to go alone." And I said, "For me to go alone? Why?" And one of the senior management folks said, "Well, this is really a very tactical meeting. It's all about implementation, and your department's going to be charged with implementation." And I'm sitting there looking at him going, "It's a lynch mob. This is not a tactical meeting." And I'm just looking at him, incredulous. And finally, I don't know if any of you know him, but Steve Lynn was the chairman and CEO at the time. And Steve looked at me and he said, "Honestly, Patty, we want you to go alone because there's a lot of anger, a lot of people very unhappy, and quite honestly, we don't think they'll hit a girl." And then he paused and said, "Especially a pregnant one." And I just looked at him, and he went on to say, and he said, "Actually, the franchisees like you and respect you, and less testosterone in the room at this point is probably a good idea. However, if you're really uncomfortable, we won't make you go alone." And I went, "Oh, what the heck." So I showed up alone the next morning, and they had a head table set up here with the leaders of the franchise community. They sat me between the two largest franchisees, and I don't mean the two largest in terms of number of stores. They sat me between the two largest franchisees. And they informed me that I did not have a speaking role, which was good because I wasn't prepared for one, but that if any questions were directed at me, I could answer them. For the next 5 hours, all the questions were directed at me. It was pretty much an interrogation. The first question, of course, was, "Why are you here alone? Where are the other guys? Where's the rest of the management team?" And at that moment, I made the decision that I couldn't do anything but answer honestly. And so I told them, I said, "They didn't think you'd hit a girl." And then very quietly, I said, "I hope they're right." And so then the rest of the meeting just proceeded that way. They wanted to know, had I ever done anything like this before? The answer was no. I'd never worked in the fast food industry. Could I guarantee them that this was going to increase their sales and profits? The answer was no. I couldn't guarantee them that. So it went on and on like that. And finally, one of the franchisees stood up, and he happened to be probably one of the most influential franchisees in the room. At one point in Sonic's history, he'd actually been president of the company while a franchisee. And he was also the biggest renegade, was the farthest away from the menu, farthest away from the operational standards, and he stood up, and I thought, oh, I'm doomed. And he said, "You know, I have the most to change of anybody here, and I'm going to do it because it's the right thing to do. We all need to come together." And he said, and he pointed at me, he said, "I admire her courage and her honesty, and I think our best shot at doing this right now is to get her help with us." And then we spent the rest of the meeting talking about how we would work together and collaborate. I agreed to all sorts of things that I was pretty sure I didn't have the authority to agree to. I agreed to holding meetings all across the country, getting franchisees' input. And that was my transformational leadership story.
Very good.
All right, Patty. I'm gonna ask you one other question. By the way, I think we made that slide, and I think we missed the most important aspect of that. So we bought a large leadership, actually a medium-sized leadership company in Atlanta about 8 years ago. It's now a very large leadership organization. Patty is an investor as well as on our board of that, and she's been very instrumental in helping us grow. So just a little bit more about Patty. So
I wondered why you left that out. So.
I know. Well, yeah.
It's not that we don't want to be associated with you, we promise.
Good.
That's right. So, Patty, the question I would have as a follow-up is that was very stressful. There's no way that didn't impact you as a leader. So the question would be, how did that change you as a leader going forward?
It changed me a lot as a leader, and I noticed earlier when you all were speaking, I think it was under energy, you had 3 C's of leadership: consistent, calm, etc. Well, I kind of developed 3 C's out of that, and the first one I mentioned, and that was courage. As a leader, you have to have courage. You have to have courage to face the bear, and that's really what I did. I'm really glad that I didn't say, no, I don't want to go alone, because courage is really important. The other thing you've got to have as a leader, and I learned it that day, is candor. You've absolutely got to be completely honest. If you don't know something, you say you don't know something, and people will appreciate that. And then the third one, for me, was compassion. And again, you guys talked about it when you were talking about tribal stories. Being in the room that day with the 400 franchisees, I got it. I got what they had at stake, their livelihoods on the line, their concerns, their fears, their strong desire to be heard and engage in things. And I got a lot of compassion for their side of the story and the fact that what we did in the senior management suite or on the 13th floor had huge impact on them, and that we needed to be compassionate and really, a 4th C, collaborative with them. And so that really made a lot of changes for me as how I approached leadership from that point.
All right, let's give a round of applause for Patty. We're going to give you a chance to ask her more questions in a minute. But now we're going to hear from our second panelist, Dick Greenlee, and hear his transformational story. Dick.
Thank you, Brent. I got a couple of notes, or I'll just blather on and on. You don't want to hear me blathering on. We have a wholesale pump supply company. We supply into the water well and oil field services company sector. It became pretty successful. So I'm really new to this leadership stuff. I didn't know anything that I was doing at all. And it did resonate. I've had really bad bosses, and I didn't want to be one. So we started becoming successful. So the thing that you're supposed to do when you become successful is join a country club. So I figured, I got the money, I might as well join the country club. So I'm joining the country club, coming back from a meeting, and I need to grab some lunch really quick. So, of course, I go to Sonic, and I'm eating my number 1 with pickles and mustard and my tots. And I pull under a tree, because I always eat in my truck, and right across the street from me, they're demolishing a building. How cool is that? They got a wrecking ball, boom, it's hitting up against the side of the building. I'm cheering for the wrecking ball guy, hit it over there and the whole thing's gonna fall. And I look up at the top and I notice a name, and I can't recall the name, but it's like Harry and Mildred, something, and the wrecking ball's hitting it, and Harry's getting a little crooked, and Mildred's not looking that good. I'm finished my tater tots, and Harry and Mildred are in a pile of smoldering wreckage. And I got to thinking, as I was wiping my mouth, I wonder what Harry and Mildred would think right now, that their legacy is in a pile of rubble. I'm sure there was a gold shovel groundbreaking deal, and I'm sure there was a ribbon cutting ceremony, and their legacy is in a smoldering pile of rubble. And is that where I'm heading? Where am I heading? Is there going to be a legacy? What's going on? Who's going to get my golf clubs 2 weeks after I'm gone? Is it going to the garage sale? I'm sure it is. Going to the garage sale. So I really started thinking intentionally, why am I doing this? Why are we building a successful business? What matters? And I think I came to the conclusion that what can transcend my existence is the only thing that can is pouring into the next generation. So that's something that's not going to end up in a pile of rubble if I can pour into that next generation somehow. So how can I do that? Well, I'm not a good speaker, and I'm not a leadership guy, because I didn't know squat until Brent and David came into our life. And so, but I do know pump stuff. I know water well pump stuff. So an opportunity came to go to China and install solar-powered pump systems in these really remote villages where little girls can't go to school because they're hauling water and there's no sanitation and hygiene, and where little kids are dying because they're drinking out of a pond. So we went to China, and we actually ended up being the first solar pump ever installed in China, so we had the Chinese National News Service following us through this whole thing. And then opportunity just kept coming this way to use our gift of water stuff. And in 2008, we became very intentional, and we formed Water4, a 501c3 nonprofit charity, and we developed a process where we can drill water wells by hand down to 150 feet for a tenth of the cost of a normal drilling rig, and we train locals on how to do this as a business. So we're not over there doing it, we're just training them how to do it as a business, providing jobs where there's 80 and 90% unemployment. And they in Africa and China, Asia, whatever, they get to be the solution to their country's problems. Well, this started taking off more than I ever thought it would, and before I knew it, we were partnering with World Vision, which, they came knocking on our door, and they've got 44,000 employees. We had 4 at that time. And they said, we want to partner with you. And I'm like, whoa, dude, we're not even your sticky note budget. What are you talking about, partner? I don't even know what that means. Well, you've got something that we want. So we're doing right now, we started last year, the 7,000 well project in West Africa. It's the largest freshwater project on earth. And World Vision is considering it as a pilot project. So as we roll this project out, we're going to drill 1 million wells in Africa and basically fix Africa by building a supply chain in so that the locals can have jobs and be the solution. So this year we'll drill about 1,000 wells. Think about why, that question why that Brent put up there is just brilliant. Why are you doing what you're doing? And think of something that can transcend your existence. And boy, does it ever add energy to your life. So thank you.
All right. So Dick, one follow-up question. So we deal with a lot of leaders that sort of hit that point that they realize, is this all I'm here for, to sort of build this business, and I've got the money and the country club and that kind of stuff. But a lot of those folks, it's like they end up deciding to have an impact and they're picking up litter on the beach or something like that, which is not bad, but is way short of the impact that they could have. So my question to you is, how did you sort of pick that, or what advice could you have for them finding an outlet for their gifts and their passion and their why, like you did?
Well, I think it comes down to what you're good at, and I didn't, I've been to Habitat for Humanity stuff, and I'm a horrible painter, and I like hanging out with the people, but if that's what I had to do as an outlet to pour into the next generation, I was going to be horrible at it, because I was like, oh shoot, I got to go paint a house today. But when it came to water well stuff, which I like geology and water well stuff, man, that was right in my wheelhouse. And traveling for 42 hours to go to a remote village in one of these countries, traveling one way 42 hours, it energizes me now. It doesn't drag me down because I can do my water stuff. So I would look first right where you're gifted, right where you're good. IT people do IT stuff, and I think that's where you can really be energized and have the energy then to try to pour into the next generation. So, thank you.
All right, thanks, Dick. Let's give a round of applause to Dick Greenlee. All right, so just a reminder, if you have questions, use joinspeaker.com/giant and feed those in. And with that, we're going to hear from Stan Clark with his last story.
Okay. Well, gosh, pretty intimidating to follow those two. Much bigger stories than mine. Mine's a very small inspiration and then 38 plus years of perspiration. But I started a little beer joint in Stillwater, Oklahoma, 2 weeks after I graduated from Oklahoma State. My starting point was just one of those, typical Sunday afternoons laying on the couch watching reruns of Star Trek in 1975. And actually at a friend of mine's house who wasn't even there. And when he broke through his double doors and said, "Hey, Clark, I'm going to open a bar," I jumped up off the couch and said, "Hey, that's a cool idea. I'll go in partners with you. I know where there's this really neat 2-story stone building. It's for rent. It's right down the street from the Gray Fox." So right then we jumped in his 1953 Chevy, and within about 10 minutes we had negotiated a lease to take that property. So anyway, that's the inception of Eskimo Joe's. There's about this 15-minute window that just, boom, that's what I've done for the rest of my life. Really, by the way, it was really an intense negotiation. Thank goodness I had that business degree, but it went something like this. Okay, now if you guys want it just like you see it, it's going to be $350 a month, and if you want air conditioning, I'm going to need $400. We said we're going to need air conditioning, and so. But truly, that is the inception of Joe's. I love to tell this, especially to marketing, professors, and because of all this market research and all that stuff. Anyway, ours was absolutely a wild hair. But I do have to say that had my dad not instilled in me the idea of wanting and aspiring to work for myself, probably wouldn't have jumped up off the couch. And as I went through the College of Business, I really did always think I was going to work for myself. That was just the orientation I had. And so, anyway, just fast forward 9 short years. In those 9 years, Eskimo Joe's truly became Stillwater's jumping little juke joint. It was a great business, thanks to David, because he kept bringing us that cold beer. And that's really all we had. We had this homogenous product. Everybody's beer was exactly the same as everybody else's beer. The only way we thought to differentiate it was really going to be cold, and of course that went with our name, Eskimo Joe. So it was like I had a party every night. I got to be the host, which was really fun for me. I loved it. If you can imagine getting to open a bar on a college campus when you're only 22 years old, that's a pretty fun job. I loved it, and I lived it, okay? So 9 years later, it's a great business. It's really very, very strong cash flowing business. We were selling more Coors beer than anybody in the state of Oklahoma. And, the place had become somewhat famous, sold tens of thousands of T-shirts. All that stuff is great. And then the state legislature changed the drinking age in the fall of '83 from 18 to 21 and was absolutely going to pull the rug out from under this fun and really, frankly, very good business and Oklahoma success story. And I just remember being confronted with that. And all I could think back on was my macroeconomics class at Oklahoma State. And they talked about how if the government or if a legal entity or if a competitor just kind of fundamentally changed the playing field, you better be ready and willing to react very quickly, do something bold if you're going to be able to survive. I thought, well, it's one thing when you're doing case studies in class, but man, this is my life. This is my business. And I really was scared to death. I remember being on the front page of the Tulsa Tribune, which was an evening paper back in the day, and it had a little cut line that said, "New beer law chills tavern owners." I thought that was a clever beer line. And, I had a glass of beer in front of that. I kept saying, "Now quit smiling, look really bummed out." I have a hard time not smiling, so I am kind of cut out for the hospitality business, I think. But at any rate, as I contemplated this dilemma, I thought the only way I could see to leverage the existing building, the existing trade name, and everything we were doing, was to expand our product mix, increase our hours. I decided to try to put a kitchen in and start serving some prepared food. So we go from 13 employees to 45 overnight, just to do a simple menu, but it was full service. And I got some great advice from restaurateurs and the restaurant industry folks that I was asking about what to do, how to do it. They said, start out real simple, don't do anything you can't do exceedingly well. You can always expand it. Had one contracting firm start building some seats, indoor seats that I could use year round because I needed to increase capacity. Had another group building me a kitchen. A guy named Wayne Curtis was willing to loan me or front me basically the restaurant equipment. Said, I've followed you, I know you're successful. Heard you're a good guy, I'll help you out, you can pay me when you can. Actually had to change banks. Bank got some cold feet. But I had to go fast because I had 6 months in which we had to derive more than half of our revenues from non-alcoholic products, or we'd have to post it 21 and over to come in, and I knew that was going to kill me. So this was really tense. And I will tell you, after 6 months, 50.4% of our revenue came from food and T-shirts, and 49.4 or whichever it was, 49.50, whatever it was, 3-2 beer. So we made it by the skin of our teeth. Now, I'm a very candid guy. I'll tell you, I did not cheat, but I would have if I'd have had to. But I didn't. These are real numbers, but I'm telling you. Oh, there you go. I love it.
May I have your attention, please? There has been a fire alarm reported in the building. There has been a fire alarm reported in the building. Please proceed to the stairways and exit the building.
Wow.
Well, I'm glad I didn't say I cheated. I'd really feel like it was my fault.
All right. Now that your planned exercise period is over, I'd like to ask Stan, are you sure you didn't cheat?
Wow, was that fun and funny? Hey, enjoyed the conversations as we were outside. Thanks, and nice to run into a relative, Mr. Perry. So thanks for that. That was fun. Okay, so anyway, we get this kitchen going, and you know, my favorite kind of thought on that was it was really exciting in spring of 1984 when we got the kitchen open to actually realize that there are actually more people who eat every day than drink every day. And so there was actually quite a market for the food side of that thing. And honestly, what looked like it might kill us was the best thing that ever happened to us, because it expanded our reach into the marketplace. So many more people eating every day. People had heard of the place, they'd seen the T-shirts, now they had a reason to want to come, and our shirt sales expanded rapidly. So at any rate, just to take a positive approach to what looked like a very negative situation, I'd say it was kind of the biggest, it was the watershed event without a doubt in my career, and just sort of sent me on the path for the rest of the way. So I'm finished.
All right. So give Stan a round of applause. Don't sit down yet, Stan. So because I was don't sit down yet. We're not done with it yet. So I was there a lot of times when I was going to college there, and there was actually an earlier time where I remember they actually changed the rules that you couldn't have a bar within X number of feet of the campus. Well, it just so happened Stan's front door was just inside that ring, okay? So they were basically saying you can't have a bar here, all right? Well, Stan figured out that if he moved his front door around to the alley, that it was outside that loop. And so for many years, probably until it became an eating establishment, that's where the front door was. And I'm thinking to myself, that's brilliant, let's go get a beer. But the question I have for you, Stan, is as you look down through that, I mean, you're in a business, at least for a long time, that had alcohol, and there's always sort of bad press. There was, I think at one time, some government folks inside of Stillwater that were really picking on you, things like that, which is obviously high stress. Your whole theory, I've known you long enough, is about smiling, right? So as a leader, how do you manage through sort of those, I mean, I appreciate the story you told about how the success on the backside, but how do you handle high stress like that as a leader?
Well, one, I guess it's just how you're made. My mom had an expression as I was growing up. She said, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. And she always just encouraged that. She's the most positive person that I've ever been around. She's 85 today and still independent and lives by herself and still drives, et cetera. So, but she's been an inspiration just on the positive side of things. I just choose not really to let things, they're just not going to get me down. I'm a glass half full kind of a guy. Whatever is dealt us, we're going to kind of deal with it. Basically, it's Stephen Covey, habit one. I couldn't have said that in 1975, but I will say I am a constant learner, and I've took pages of notes listening to you guys this morning. But I am eager just to kind of study leadership, understand it, try to become a better leader. Love to be a leader people want to follow. I probably need to engage these guys professionally, but at any rate, I'm not sure I've got a great answer on that. I will say this, at one point in my career, the mayor of Stillwater was adamantly opposed to drinking establishments. And at the time, I was engaging, I was having these big anniversary celebrations that had spilled outside of our business and were literally the sea of humanity from Oklahoma State on the west to Duck Street on the east. And the last one of those we had, the police estimated there were 37,000 people there on Saturday night. But a friend of mine who had been mayor was in one of the early Leadership Oklahoma classes. And he teed up this issue for the Leadership Oklahoma class to observe and then to comment on. So it was the mayor of the community who couldn't stand me. It was me, this little Bart guy. It was the chief of police and the president of the chamber. So they put that program in front of Leadership Oklahoma. We all tell our side of the story, and then they give feedback. And if you're familiar with the process, you can understand but it was so real to me. And you talk about nervous. I didn't have the experience of standing in front of groups and public speaking that I have today at the time. In fact, I hadn't done any of it. So I was scared to death. I was absolutely thrilled that the first guy out of the class, after we'd all told our kind of slant, said, well, I know one thing. If Stillwater doesn't want it, you can bring it to Ponca City. And the crowd went nuts. And I was like, whew, and my stress level dropped tremendously. So anyway.
All right, great answer. Brent's got a couple of questions from the audience. I want to make a point about this concept of stress. It's become I'll tell you, it's a personal passion of mine around how do you reduce stress? Because I find that organizations are really stressed when they're not growing, and then they're really stressed when they are growing, right? And so there's got to be a better way. And I will tell you that about 90% of all stress is sort of self-inflicted. Learning as a leader how to reduce stress in an organization is a skill that you have to learn. Whenever something bad happens, you really have a couple of choices. You can bring your team in, and you can kind of ramp up the stress level. And I'll bet every one of you has been in one of those situations before. But I want you to think about it this way, and that is, on any given day, as people in a profession, we probably only use our gifts and our talents. You know, every day doesn't require 100% of all of those gifts and talents. We're probably running through most days using about 60% of our gifts. But I want you to think about what would most label as stressful situations as an opportunity for you and your team to use those gifts at 100%. So when you frame that with a team, say, look, I know this didn't work out the way I thought it would, but how cool is it? We're going to get to use our gifts at 100%. So for the next hour, let's do that, and let's see what solutions we can come up with. Now, Brent mentioned stress reduces the IQ by 40%. I can tell you, I think that increases the IQ because all of a sudden people are energized. Yeah, it was something bad that happened, but they'll really come together, and you'll be amazed at how much quicker and how much easier new ideas begin to flow in that environment versus one where you're highly stressed and everybody's just kind of in that CYA mode. So anyway, thanks for teeing that up, Stan. Great comment.
All right, so I think we've got time for one, maybe two questions. And one question for Dick Greenlee that came up from the audience. Dick, if you wouldn't mind, is how did your involvement with Water 4, how did that change or how did that impact your employees at your for-profit organization? What was the impact there?
That's a really good question. I think it really helps in an organization if the people, your coworkers, are acknowledged, and if they're working in something that could possibly bring significance. And bringing water to dying kids definitely brings significance. So we try to engage all of our employees and coworkers as much as we can in Water 4. We've had several go on trips over there. We have engineers that work on projects, and it really builds a camaraderie and a team mentality when you know that if we ship this order correctly, then some revenue will come in that we can then have some time or resources to go help somebody in India or somebody in North Korea or whatever it might be, wherever we're working. So yeah, it's a huge deal to be able to involve somebody in something bigger than themselves.
Okay. We had a question for Patty. David, do you want to do that one?
Yeah, I've got it. So, Patty, you've got a book out, all right? And For those of you that don't know, it's from the
Confessions
from the Corner Office. So Patty wrote that some time ago. So the question is, what compelled you to write the book? And just tell us a little bit about that book, because it is a great book.
Okay, well, I wasn't planning on writing a book, and I co-authored it with the former chairman and CEO of Sonic's ad agency. We worked together for many, many years, and we traveled together, spoke together, and we got asked after we both had retired to speak at a couple of conferences, and several folks started saying, you guys ought to put that in a book. Those are some great leadership instincts, because that's what we would talk about, is what are the instincts of leadership. And many of them are things your mother taught you. Like some of my greatest leadership instincts were my mom telling me, be happy. No matter what your circumstances, you control your happiness. I think you guys even talked about that this morning. Stole that from my mother, probably. But anyway, so that's what compelled us. Several people started saying you ought to write a book. Well, we didn't know how to write a book, so we actually went to Barnes & Noble and bought a book on how to write a book and get it published. And I'm not kidding. And we just followed it. We literally followed the steps. We were pretty good marketers, and we sent proposals off to 3 publishing companies, and one of them, Wiley & Sons, one of the bigger ones, bid on it and called us and said, we're interested. And so that's kind of what propelled us to write our book. But our book isn't scientific, it's not research-based, it's all personal stories of mistakes we've made, lessons we've learned, great leaders we've worked for, horrible leaders we've worked for, and it's all about stories and all about leaders need to follow their instincts, because oftentimes an instinct will tell you to do something, but you're like, well, no, I'm watching other leaders and that's not what they're doing. And so then you start to follow bad behavior versus listening to your gut. So that's what that is.
Very good. Thanks, Patty.
And then we had one question for Stan, and that is, how did you get into the business of T-shirts and cups? So you went from beer to food and then T-shirts. Tell us that transition.
Well, we actually had T-shirts for sale the very first day we opened Eskimo Joe's, clear back in July '75. Just very fortunately, a couple of guys started a screen printing business in Stillwater the same summer we were trying to get our bar put together. We didn't have enough money to even hire contractors, so we did all the carpentry work ourselves. So it took us a couple months to kind of get that going, and they just stumbled by and banged on the door, and we thought, well, I don't know, and I guess I need to back up just a little bit. Steve wanted to call the place Eskimo Joe's. And I was like, wow, I don't know, Eskimo Joe's. But every time we'd go through this discussion, our friends would all come in and they'd just chant, Eskimo Joe's. So here we go. I realized there's a lot of mojo and a lot of momentum going for this name, so we're going to call it that. So, okay. It was bizarre enough. I thought, well, that'll cut through clutter. And again, these are things I know today. I wouldn't have said those words in '75. But I did think it'd stand out. And hey, by the way, I was a marketing guru at age 22. I had 3 hours of marketing at Oklahoma State when I graduated. So, but what I did know is we needed a logo, so that symbol that would automatically conjure up our business in the hearts and minds of our guests. I even remember the definition of a logo. So we needed one. We didn't know where to get it. And a freshman commercial arts student named Bill Thompson designed our logo. He sat in one of the front windows of Joe's as we were remodeling it. And on an art pad about that big with a magic marker, he pins out Eskimo Joe and Buffy. And it hadn't changed a lick since then. And that's exactly what he designed, and I fell in love with it immediately. And so I've had 39 almost years now to reflect on that, and it's a boy and his dog. It's a universal theme, and that great big smile is welcoming and draws you in. I didn't know any of that at the time. I just thought, man, that's cool, and it made the name make sense. So how do we get into T-shirts? We just decided, what the heck, let's try it. I'll never forget, we bought 72 of them. 3 dozen were yellow and 3 dozen were blue, one color logo. And the reason it prints so well in one color is the way it was designed with that magic marker. But at any rate, we sold every one of them the first week we were open. And it was just some foreshadowing of some great things to come. It meant the world to me when someone would buy it, because I thought it was the ultimate affirmation that they really liked the place. I knew it was going to conjure up word-of-mouth advertising. I had no idea it was going to end up becoming the best business I've got. But at any rate, that's the story behind the T-shirt.
So several of you have discounted decisions that you've made. Anybody read the book Blink? So the whole point of Blink is you can make decisions in a blink, because the good Lord gave you a brain that's way better than any research you can do over 6 months, right? And they figured out that decisions made in a blink are oftentimes as effective, if not more effective, if you spent 6 months or a year working on it. So the point of that is you have to learn to trust yourself as a leader. If you've got good experience, good thoughts, and you can just spot things, that's okay. Don't discount that, because that's just a great trait of a leader.
All right. So we're out of time. Our little fire alarm cost us a few minutes, so we don't have any time for more questions. But join me. Would you give these guys a round of applause again? You guys were great. One comment that I want you to take away, and then I'm going to share a comment from the audience because I think it's spot on. And that is, as you look at these leaders, I want you to take away a couple things. The first thing is, you've heard each one of them talk about they're continuing to grow as leaders, right? Your leadership journey doesn't stop when you become the CEO or the COO or whatever. All three of them, that's one thing I admire about all three of them so much, is they continue to want to learn and ask questions and do those things. So don't think that leadership really is a journey that has an end. It doesn't. You can always grow at that. I would also go back and just to say, if we think about reflecting on what we talked about this morning on transformational leadership, I mean, Dick Greenlee, great example of engaging the why in an organization. Patty talking about sort of having that courage to go right at those problems, even though that was a really uncomfortable situation. My guess would be you probably wouldn't have had success at Sonic if you hadn't learned that lesson, right? I mean, that was absolutely a transformational point. And then I love Stan's story about sort of that he was faced with that crisis of we can't be a bar or just a bar anymore and having to do something else. My guess would be if you hadn't been faced with that crisis, Eskimo Joe's probably wouldn't have been on the trajectory you are today. So there's opportunity and great crisis. And I want to close with just one comment from the audience that I thought was great. And that is, and we didn't make this up, this is from these folks. These three leaders all have one thing paramount to leadership. They are authentic and genuine. Their nonverbal screams they're real, genuine folks. You can't be a leader unless you have a follower. People love substance and hate show, and you can tell these folks value substance over show. And so I thought that was a great close. Give them a round of applause again. You guys were great.